Call the September meeting of the Manitou Springs Planning Commission to order. First item of business, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Graybill.
Present.
Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Commissioner Storm.
Present.
Commissioner Casey.
Present.
Commissioner DeLay.
Present.
Commissioner Day. Okay. Can you?
Present.
Thank you. Okay, well, start out, first, item of business is to approve the June 11th minutes of the, commission.
Motion to approve June 11, 2025 meeting minutes.
A second.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay, let's move on. The next item is August 13th commission minutes. Is there, would you like to?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from August 13th.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And one abstention there. Okay, so we'll move on. Next item is public comment on non-agenda items. And if anybody in the audience would like to comment on something that's not on our agenda tonight, that would be the time. I don't see any hands raised online and nobody seems to be stepping up. So we'll move on to our business part of the meeting. I'll just start by describing the process. Well, I'll call an item for consideration and planning staff will describe what the request is and describe their analysis and findings. And following that, we'll allow the applicant to state their case. And following that, we'll open up the conversation to anyone in the audience can comment at that time on that item. Following that, we'll deliberate and we'll vote either to approve or deny the item. Possibly we'll table it if we need more information. And as we're going through the process, we are guided by our LUDC, our Land Use and Development Code. We don't make up new laws. We just interpret what's in our code. That's our mission. So with that, we'll start it. Does anybody have any ex parte contacts or conflicts to disclose? And seeing none, we'll move on. The first item of new business is a short-term rental 2501 423 Washington Avenue.
Thank you. For the record, Zachary Davison, planner. A short-term rental 2501. The applicant, Kristen Cole, is here with us today. The zone district is general residential. It's also in the Lower Washington Historic District. Here is an overview of the location, just right behind us on Washington Avenue. The request is a short-term rental, the entire bottom level, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. There will be 3 on-site parking spaces where 2 are required and potentially a 4th in the Washington Avenue residential parking permit program area. The short-term rental will have a private entrance. The property owners will occupy the upper level for the entire year. They will be, this will be their primary residence. Background on the short-term rental permit: a business license is required. Neighborhood services inspection for life safety is required. All licenses are valid for 1 year from the date of issuance and must be renewed yearly. And the owner has signed the owner acknowledgements, pretty much showing their understanding of all the rules outlined in this application. Here is a screenshot of our current short-term rental inventory. At the present moment, we have 42 total. 38 are conditional use, and for our short-term rental, and our current utilization is 1.56%. With, I guess just, I should state that our cap is 2%, so we are getting pretty close. I did do a little math, and it's not shown on here, but I believe we have enough for 11, roughly 11 more before we hit that cap.
Mary?
There we go, yes.
So currently there's not just the percentage wise, there's open, non-overlapping 500-foot space there.
There are a couple areas in the city that can accommodate some, yes,
And this is one of them?
correct.
Okay,
Yep.
just
And I'll provide, I actually have a slide where I have a kind of a zoom level that way.
perfect. Thank you.
Okay, and here it is. So this is the property here. It's a little hard to see there, but outlined in blue, it is just between two 500-foot buffers. And the surrounding land use, it is a mix of downtown, general residential, open space, public facility, and park, with the largest land use being park. Here is a picture of the site plan, the 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, access to the balcony, and entrance there towards the bottom. Here is the site plan with photos of each space within the rental. The owner will use a website called Owner Res. Owner Res allows them to manage their short-term rental and has integration into multiple rental platforms, such as Airbnb. The draft listing was pretty large. So I didn't include it here, but it is on the agenda for anybody who wants to take a look at it. So the approval criteria for the short-term rental is that the short-term rental does not adversely impact the surrounded uses, and that the short-term rental does not encroach upon traditional neighborhood characteristics. And this. We received no public comment for this one, so should the City Planning Commission find it appropriate to approve SDR 2501, staff has no condition recommendations. And this concludes my presentation. I will go ahead and put the motion language up right now.
Any questions? Mike?
Zach, you said that in your report that there was off-street parking for 3 vehicles.
Correct, yes.
Does that include inside the garage?
There is no garage, so the parking is kind of underneath
Okay,
the bottom deck.
Right. It looked like a garage. I thought that was my
Oh.
mistake, but I only see 2 when I went by.
Yeah, so we went ahead and calculated it based on what the required parking width. So it can accommodate 3. And of course, right now it only accommodates 2 because that's their vehicle. So in terms of the width of that space, per code, it could support 3.
Okay.
And I guess on the parking question is if the owner's residing, they have no place to park their car if they're using those 2 spaces. So then technically, if an owner's residing, do we need to claim the 1 parking spot for them as being, because they're saying they're residing there, right?
They
So-
will be there, yes, yeah.
So they should have a parking spot. And so that takes away from a parking spot for the rental. Am I not looking at that correctly?
Code only requires 2 parking spots total. There is no cumulative count. for both uses. Regardless of this fact, I did, in speaking with the property owner, try to manage to have four as it was kind of historically required for an application like this.
When you need clarification, ask for it.
I can explain a little further if
Yeah,
need be.
sure.
So code doesn't necessarily mention that the parking is cumulative. It does mention in spots when it should be cumulative. It is mentioned that like hotel motel use and restaurant use will use the combined parking total. But it speaks on accessory and temporary uses using whatever primary use as the current total. But there is nothing that explicitly states that short-term rental use and the use of a property as the primary use requires a cumulative total parking space.
Any other questions? Okay,
We have one online, Megan.
Hi, folks. Is there any code violations for this house? Like, does it meet height standards and other
It-
things?
I apologize for interrupting. It did obtain a variance for the height, I think 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, got it. No other violations?
pardon,
No
could you repeat that? I didn't quite get.
Just wondering if there are any other code violations.
No, there were no violations at all.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the reason they got the height variance was partly due to their elevator because it's got a really, it's a very bizarre lot built into the hillside. Okay, if there are no more questions, and now's the time the applicant can come up to the table. And you have to, get the mic pretty close within about 3 inches of your mouth and hit the little button in the middle and it'll turn green and then you can speak. You have the floor now. So you can say what you'd like to say and then we'll grill you.
Okay. Well, first, thank you for your time and consideration and just for the city of Manitou's patience as this house took us over 3 years to build. My husband and I acted as contractors. So we literally built the house ourselves with support of local contractors. And as you said, it is a somewhat bizarre lot in that we had to excavate into the property in order to meet the requirement for the parking spaces. We didn't know that going in when we bought the lot, so that was a big learning. As Zach said, there is space for 3 cars on the driveway if they're small cars. If somebody rented the property with a big truck, we'd have to arrange, parking. But, to meet the requirement for 2 on-site parking spots, we would provide those in the driveway. And then our cars, we have applied for the residential parking permits, and we would park up in kind of that dirt lot space further up on Washington. So just wanted to clarify that. We've gotten to know our neighbors well during the last few years, and nothing's more important to us than keeping those relationships good, both with the spa and with the residential neighbors we have on one side of us. That's our priority. And so we will continue to be in really close communication, just as we were through the construction process, to make sure that their spaces are available for use and that we're not infringing on any of their rights or space. I just wanted to clarify that. Any other questions for me?
Anything else? Yes.
Yeah, I know y'all were living in Florida or spending half of your time in Florida. Are you now a full-time resident and registered to vote in Manitou?
We are not registered to vote yet. I've got an appointment a week from Monday to get our driver's license. So that's kind of the first step. And now that we have the certificate of occupancy, we can show that we actually have a physical address that is recognized by like the postal service, et cetera. So I've been here since March. and will be a permanent, am a permanent resident now. The closing of our house in Florida is scheduled for September 19th, of which at that point we won't have any property there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
So did I understand you correctly? You have run this past all of your close neighbors?
Yes, both Rachel Jacobs on one side, who she's a dear friend at this point. And then I'm speaking with the spa, Sunwater Spa, Don Godey and Mike, his last name escapes me, manager. And they've expressed, interest in preliminary conversations of really using that as an extension for the spa. That they have guests that would, find that attractive. And, in my perfect world, they are the primary, customer, and that they can be, my customer, and that they can support that. And so in part of, if this gets approved, one of the next steps I've looked to do is kind of set up a website for for the property that will then integrate, that the spa can use to like book directly with us. Because we all think that it would be a really great value add for their customers.
Anything else? Okay, thanks. If we need more from you, we'll bring you back. You can go back.
Thanks.
Okay, the hearing is now open to the public. If anybody in the audience would like to speak, now would be the time. I see no takers. Nobody online, so we're ready to deliberate.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve STR 2501 at 423 Washington Avenue based on the findings with no conditions.
I will second that.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, let's vote. All those in favor? Okay, great. So that's been approved. Sure. Okay. We'll move on to our next item of new business is vacation 2501 and rezone 2501, right-of-way vacation and rezoning for 10 Old Man's Trail and 487 El Paso Boulevard.
Thank you, Chair Delwich. For the record, Chelsea Royston. And let me just get my screen shared here really quickly. Okay, so we are looking at a rezoning and a partial right-of-way vacation for the properties known as Hiawatha Gardens and a portion of the right-of-way directly adjacent to that. The request is to rezone 2 parcels from commercial to public facilities and to vacate a portion of Old Man's Trail that is currently developed with a portion of the parking lot. So just as a brief overview, we've seen Hiawatha Gardens before. We will see it again. The process is that an application, or many applications in this case, they go through administrative review and comment, and then they are forwarded to a board, either the Historic Preservation Commission or the City Planning Commission. They then make a recommendation to City Council, and City Council can approve or deny several applications, including these 2. From there, then it is kind of in Pikes Peak Regional Building Department's purview in terms of the physical improvements of the structures. So some of the entitlements that we've seen for this for this property include, these two, the rezoning and the right-of-way vacation. We will be seeing a major development plan next month. And the reason we're staggering those is because that application will be more robust. But in terms of approvals, the rezoning and right-of-way vacation are both approved by ordinance. And so therefore they need 2 readings at city council. So we've designed it so that the rezoning, the right-of-way vacation, and the major development plan will all be, in theory, reviewed for approval at one final city council hearing. So they can all be heard at the same time. So that's why we're seeing these 2 applications now and the major development plan next month. I included some of our other standard slides that we've been including on Hiawatha Gardens applications. As a reminder, City Planning Commission does have purview over use standards and streets and roadway intersection standards. So that is part of why we see the right-of-way vacation here. Oh, I do apologize. There was one other item. There's also grading permits and subdivision. You can see on this slide. Those are reviewed and approved administratively because they are purely technical documents. So the subdivision is where we see this right-of-way vacation. The vacation is the only portion of the subdivision that the Planning Commission has purview over. So jumping into our site, Hiawatha Gardens operates as one site, though it is 2 parcels. You can see a parcel line kind of running north-south on that property. You can also see perhaps where this right-of-way goes right through a portion of the parking lot. It's actually a portion that has been developed with EV chargers. So this application is mostly to realign the right-of-way with the path of travel as it has been developed. There won't be too many changes. There won't be any changes actually that are noticeable kind of in real world with this realignment. As I stated before, the subdivision is an administrative review, but I wanted you to see that this map on the left shows our current existing plat. And you can again see the right-of-way there, kind of cutting through a portion of the property. And then our as-platted, or our replatted, our proposed replat on the right. Colors make it fun. So the to be vacated portion on the left is blue, and the to be dedicated portion on the right for the proposed replat is being reviewed as part of the subdivision. So again, this won't impact Old Man's Trail as it is developed currently. There are no plans for Hiawatha Gardens to change that development. It is to change the development of Old Man's Trail. It's simply to realign the subdivision boundaries with the developed path of travel. We do have several vacation of right-of-way approval criteria. I went into detail in the staff report about whether or not it's staff's opinion that these review criteria, whether they're met or not. I believe that they are met in this case, and that the vacation of right-of-way will be beneficial to the city. If anyone has any specific questions about those approval criteria, I'd be more than happy to answer that now or during the question and answer portion.
Any
But-
questions?
Okay. But yeah, kind of in the sake of for the sake of expedience. I'll move on to the rezoning. This is the proposed replat, and the resulting single lot that will then be Hiawatha Gardens is proposed to be rezoned to public facilities. It is currently zoned commercial, but it is owned by the city of Manitou Springs. As far as comparing those two zoning districts, I didn't see any reason why this proposed zone district would be a problem there. So the commercial zoning has a minimum lot frontage of 50 feet. The public facilities zone does not have a minimum lot frontage, so it meets that requirement for dimensional standards. The commercial zone district allows a building height of 35 feet, where public facilities is limited to 30 feet. And as far as uses are, there are several uses that are allowed in public facilities that are not permitted in commercial. But the main difference I found was that residential is permitted in commercial and it is not permitted in public facilities. Public facilities is for public ownership only, and residential is not permitted. It also would not be permitted on the first floor there because the majority of the developed part of the site is in the floodway. Again, there are several approval criteria. I do not feel that this proposed rezone would cause any problems for the city. I think it makes sense to have a city-owned parcel be zoned public facilities. It is already being used as such, and it's developed with a parking lot. There are plans to redevelop the building portion of the site, but I believe that major development plan will comply with the development standards of the public facility zone. So should the Planning Commission find it appropriate to grant the rezoning and the vacation of right-of-way, staff does not recommend any conditions. And I do have two separate motions prepared. If anyone would prefer to make that combined, I think that would be fine as well. But if you have any questions, please let me know. And this concludes my presentation.
Any questions? The only thing I'm curious about is the subdivision will combine the two lots. So right now we're rezoning two separate parcels in one motion. Is that what we're doing?
So that's part of why we designed it to all be heard at and finalized at the same city council meeting, because all of these actions should be recorded at the same time, so that we are rezoning. It doesn't quite matter, honestly, if it's two lots or if it's one lot. We're rezoning the same proposed footprint of the Hiawatha Gardens property. And so when that subdivision is recorded, the vacation is recorded, the dedication is recorded, all of these things fit together like a little puzzle. And then the rezoning is only for the Hiawatha Gardens portion of the property.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, and you're acting as the applicant and the presenter, or?
No, actually, thank you for bringing that up. I am acting as the planner on Hiawatha Gardens. Erin Ringsred is acting as the project manager.
Okay,
Yeah, we're dividing and conquering. So I'm here as the applicant. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer those questions as the applicant on the project.
any questions for the applicant? No? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Nothing other than we're excited to bring the major development forward next month. So.
Thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing. If anybody in the audience would like to comment on this, this would be the time. Okay, I don't see any action there, so I will close the public hearing. Seems pretty straightforward to me.
I can make a motion if you like. I'd like to make a motion to approve RE 2501 rezone at 10 Old Man's Trail and 487 El Paso Boulevard based upon the findings that the request meets the review criteria for granting a rezoning as set forth in City Code 18.06.4.3 and the vacation VAC 2501, same address, etc. Code section 18.06.4.19.
Great. I'll second that. Okay, is there any discussion? Then let's vote. All those in favor? Okay. That passes. Great. So we'll move on. Other business now is consideration of Title 18 code revisions for ADUs, residential occupancy standards, and parking requirements for multifamily developments.
Okay, thank you very much. For the record, Fred Rolandhagen, Planning Director, and let me take some time to get my PowerPoint up on the screen.
Zach, are you able to remote Fred?
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Okay, this is consideration of code revisions for Title 18, the Land Use and Development Code. This is a public hearing. We are considering we're considering revisions to housing occupancy limits, accessory dwelling units, and minimum parking requirements for multifamily development. As most everybody knows, these code revisions are largely in response to state land use legislation that was adopted in 2024. There are 3 House bills that compel compliance. House Bill 24-1007, 1152, and 1304, respectively, for housing occupancy limits, accessory dwelling units, and minimum parking requirements for new multifamily development. Just a little bit of a recap. The Planning Commission held a series of working sessions, 4 working sessions over the summer from May through August, where we introduced the information and had a good deal of discussion. We presented a city attorney legal memo, which identified alternatives for how the city could react to this legislation. You invited the Housing Advisory Board to one of your meetings, to your June meeting, to participate in discussion and talk about um, how to allow accessory dwelling units. And then you also reviewed potential impacts of accessory dwelling units. If you recall, in July, we reviewed potential areas in the city that could accommodate for accessory dwelling units, and identified areas that would potentially not be allowed due to geologic hazards or no build areas. And we also identified that there's probably a greater likelihood of accessory dwelling units coming online through either through existing dwellings or existing structures rather than new structures being constructed due to available land or maybe lack of available land potentially. And then in August, we reviewed draft language for those accessory dwelling units as well as the other legislation that we are considering. So I'm going to go through the three potential changes. I'll start with housing occupancy limits. If you recall, this is modifying the definition of the term household. Our household currently is not in compliance with the state legislation. And so we need to change that so it doesn't refer to occupancy limits related occupancy limits for people that would be related by blood, marriage, or adoption, guardianship, things like that. Those are the items that are in our definition right now. So the proposed definition would be simply the number of household would be the number of persons occupying each dwelling unit shall not exceed the maximum permitted by the applicable adopted building code or safety code. So we're tying it to the building code and to or safety code or the housing habitability code or by any other applicable state or federal law or regulation or by affordable housing guidelines applicable to the dwelling unit. So what that does is it ties the number of persons that are allowed in a household unit, it ties it to building and safety of the unit to assure that it's not that any unit isn't occupied by more people than what the unit can actually support by code. Then we will move on to minimum parking requirements. What I'm doing, I'm saving the ADUs until the end, and we can talk about all of that. Please ask questions at any point, and I'm happy to answer them. But the second one is minimum parking requirements. So what this does is it accepts out certain new multifamily development within the designated transit service area for minimum parking requirements. The transit service area, as you recall, is an area that's been designated by the state land use legislation, and that transit service area is shown by a map that's kept by the Colorado Department of Local Affairs. And I have a map of that and we can show that. So under mobility requirements, under the chapter 18.03.08 mobility requirements, this is the area where different uses, different types of developments are, where parking spaces are required for different types of development and different types of uses. And so what we're identifying is basically an exception to number one. What we say is on number one for new development that all new development shall provide off-street parking and loading areas in accordance with this section. And then the section lists out those particular requirements. What we're doing is providing an exception for what we say here, new multifamily residential development, number one. Number two, adaptive reuse projects of an existing building for completely residential purposes. That's the second one. And then number three, adaptive reuse of an existing building for a mix of uses. in which at least 50% of the resulting use is residential do not apply to the areas shown, and that these three things do not apply to the areas shown on the applicable transit service area map that is prepared by Colorado Department of Local Affairs. This language is a little complicated, but it's taken directly from the state land use legislation to assure that we comply with the state land use legislation. And of course, there's an exception to an exception. And right now, the language that you see here is language that's been recommended by our legal counsel. And so so there is an exception. The city may require a space, at least one, a minimum of, or I guess a maximum of one parking space per unit, per residential unit for multi-family residential development, that it has 20 or more units within this transit service area. But we have to support that requirement by findings and substantial evidence that shows that not enforcing said requirement will have a substantial negative impact that cannot be mitigated by other strategies that is outlined in the House Bill 1304. So the limit, we have to justify that reasoning. And what I would recommend is that if we ever get ourselves into a situation where we're reviewing a multifamily development and we feel like it really does need some off-street parking, we'll be working very closely with our legal counsel to describe and define that justification so we can stay in compliance with this law.
So Fred, so example, if Tubby's Turnaround was a multi-unit place, that would be justification that we could use that they have to have parking because there's no parking there right in the middle of downtown. If and we'd have to zone it, but that's what we're talking about, right? It's something that's coming in where we have zero parking that we really have to justify it.
Yeah. Something like, something along Manitou Avenue, along the bus route is a perfect example where you're seeing either adaptive reuse or you're seeing like maybe a scrape and build. And for the record, there is no proposal like that happening, like that right now. But if somebody wanted to put in a new apartment complex of 20 or more units, and it's right in the middle of the downtown where parking is at a premium, what I would probably do is recommend justification of off-street parking because of the lack of on-street parking. And one of the reasons would be due to our parking permit program, and things like that, and work with our attorney's office to make that justification. This would be in contrast to, for example, going east on Manitou Avenue, where potentially you have more off-street parking, for example, in the Urban Renewal Authority area out there, where there's more room for parking on the street. Okay, and here's a map. This is the map that's from DOLA, and what I did is I zoomed in as best as I could around the city limits of Manitou. But this is actually a map. You've probably seen it in previous working sessions. It's an excerpt of the larger statewide map. DOLA has created this map statewide that shows where the transit service area is. So what you see in this bubble purplish blue area is that transit service area. And it follows, of course, it follows the bus lines, the two bus lines that go through the city, as well as the bus stops that exist. And so this is that transit service area. So what we're talking about are these minimum parking requirements, or these parking requirements would be affected by multifamily development in this area. And so actually it does take a good chunk of the city. It does not include the far west side of Manitou Avenue as it goes out of the city along as it hits Serpentine Drive. It does not include a lot of the Crystal Hills and Crystal Park areas to the south and east of Manitou Avenue. And some of the some of the Via neighborhoods, some of the Via's neighborhood in the northeast side of town is not part of this transit service area. Okay, let's move on to accessory dwelling units for code revisions. And just as a summary, I provided this as a summary of what the proposed changes do. Number one, it establishes the use of an ADU, which we haven't had before, and it provides our ability to regulate accessory dwelling units. It allows them in 3 zoning districts: the general residential, low-density residential, and the hillside low-density residential zoning districts. These are the 3 zoning districts that allow single-family residential units. The proposed revisions allow ADUs to be internal to an existing home, like in a basement or like a second floor or a top floor. It can be attached to a single-family residence, or it could be detached from a non-conforming single-family home. It must comply with, right now, the way it's written, it must comply with dimensional standards for the respective zoning districts. So an ADU must comply with setbacks and the height standards for the respective zoning district. It is not subject to density restrictions as per the state legislation. We've talked about this before. We're not able, or the state legislation does not allow us to do that. So if you have 5,000 square feet and you have a single family residence on it, we have to allow, and the minimum, and I can never remember the minimum square footage, but I believe it's 43 or 4,600 square feet.
Yeah, 44.
4,400 square feet. Thank you. That means we would have to allow an ADU on a 5,000 square foot lot if it has a single family residence. We could not require more square footage to bring it up if somebody would be proposing like a regular second dwelling unit. It is subject to our other codes. So an ADU would be subject to the Historic Preservation Code. It would be subject to the Fire Code, our Housing Habitability Code, and the applicable building codes for construction. Right now, and I did some review, so if we need to review this or discuss this, we certainly can. But my understanding from our working sessions is we want a minimum square footage, bare minimum square footage for ADUs of 250 square feet, and then a maximum would be no more than the total habitable space that's found in the existing single family residence. If I have that incorrect, or if I've misunderstood the Planning Commission from previous working sessions, let's discuss that. Right now, as we had discussed in previous working sessions, there would be no short-term rental restrictions to an accessory dwelling unit. An ADU would be subject to short-term rental regulations, and if it complied with the short-term rental regulations, could be subject to could apply for a short-term rental license. And then parking. This is one thing that we haven't talked a whole lot about, but it is something that's required by the state legislation. Only where on-street parking is prohibited, we can require one off-street parking space for the accessory dwelling unit. Otherwise, we're not allowed to require that. If there is an existing off-street parking space that's already there and available, we can require that be for the accessory dwelling unit. But unless on-street parking is prohibited, we cannot require an additional parking space to be constructed or made available. Okay. And so here's Title 18 code revisions. And I apologize, I already made a typo in the draft ordinance, and we can and we can take that out. But we would be removing the use standards where we said that to assure that accessory dwelling units are permitted for use as a short-term rental if they comply with all of the short-term rental regulations and are able to obtain a license. Let's see. And then minor site plans. A minor site plan would be required for issuance of building permit for an accessory dwelling unit. A minor site plan is an administrative process, and is also part of the requirement from the state legislation that review and approval of an ADU be administrative in nature. There are other code revisions, Title 13. Title 13 is something that the Planning Commission doesn't make recommendations on, but we are revising Title 13 after talking with Public Services to allow ADU to extend the water service line associated with a principal dwelling unit. However, if that option is exercised, the ADU must be individually metered and the line must be adequately sized as determined by the city engineer. Okay, and some additional information. We did receive one comment, one letter so far from the Manitou Springs Housing Advisory Board. I have some available. Does everybody have a copy? Okay, that's good. We received a response from the Housing Advisory Board. I emailed it to the Planning Commission, and I wanted to enter it into the record. I'm happy to read it into the record if that's acceptable, or
Yeah, please do. I think it's important.
okay. Would you mind? Okay. I'm going to have Chelsea read it into the record to give me a break. Thank you, Chelsea.
To the Manitou Springs City Planning Commission regarding accessory dwelling unit ordinance. Like many other communities across the nation, Manitou Springs has a housing affordability crisis. This issue is further complicated by limited development opportunities given geographic and environmental constraints, zoning code restrictions, along with the perception that an increase in new builds would jeopardize the neighborhood character and charm. As a result, Manitou has very few new single-family or multifamily properties built over the past decade. Colorado's House Bill 1152 was signed into law to address housing affordability issues by requiring municipalities that meet certain criteria to allow accessory dwelling units by right in any zone district that allows single detached dwelling units. While Manitou's zoning code currently allows ADUs, it applies stricter standards than are allowable under House Bill 1152. House Bill 1152 firmly aligns to the Manitou Springs Housing Advisory Board's charter and mission, which is designed to support, inform, and encourage diverse and affordable housing options within Manitou. While we recognize that there is no silver bullet to solve such a complex problem, ADUs contribute to a diversified suite of solutions and may be particularly helpful for seniors who desire to age in place, workers who desire to live where they work, and residents who desire to see their neighborhoods remain socioeconomically diverse, i.e. limit gentrification. The Housing Advisory Board appreciates and supports the Planning Department's effort to develop an ordinance that meets the requirements of House Bill 1152 while balancing the needs of our community, such as protecting neighborhood integrity and view sheds. We expect that new ADUs will appropriately increase density over time. The goal is not to maximize density nor to increase city revenue through fees or property taxes. The Housing Advisory Board has the specific comments on the draft ordinance. Number one, the Housing Advisory Board strongly supports encouraging affordability for newly developed ADUs, targeting monthly housing costs that accommodate Manitou's workforce without spending more than 30% of their income on housing. There's a footnote on that one directing to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's definition of affordable housing. Number two, the HAB strongly supports prohibiting new ADUs from being used as short-term rentals. Allowing ADUs as short-term rentals is contrary to the motivation to allow them by right. While there are no openings for new short-term rental licensing applications under current regulations, this ordinance could change in the future. The Housing Advisory Board point three, the Housing Advisory Board supports applying the existing development standards for the zoning district to ADUs. These standards related to setbacks, lot coverage, and slope steepness will naturally limit the number of new detached ADUs that could be constructed. Based on this and analysis conducted by the Planning Department, the Housing Advisory Board expects greater opportunities with conversion of existing structures, like garages and basements, as attached ADUs. Number four, consider revising the size requirements to accommodate larger and smaller ADUs. The Housing Advisory Board suggests allowing for the maximum ADU size to scale with that of the principal unit. The following suggested revised language also accommodates efficient small ADU designs, leveraging habitability codes to regulate the minimum size allowable per occupant. The proposed language is accessory dwelling units shall be no more than the greater of 750 square feet or 50% of the principal unit in habitable space. Point number five, clarify the parking requirements for ADUs in the code. House Bill 1152 limits the conditions under which off-street parking may be required for a new ADU. The Housing Advisory Board suggests adding code language to clarify the parking requirements. Number six, clarify how the setback requirements apply to conversions of non-conforming existing structures to ADUs. The Housing Advisory Board suggests that the setback requirements do not apply in these instances. Number seven, the Housing Advisory Board strongly encourages that appropriate monitoring and compliance processes are in place so ADUs are used as they are intended. Number eight, the Housing Advisory Board strongly encourages that the City Planning Commission and City Planning Department have strong vetting procedures in place to ensure that the corporate developers and similar cannot negatively take advantage of House Bill 1152. And number eight, I think, the Housing Advisory Board strongly encourages an effective public education campaign that provides clarity around the new ADU requirements and various what-if scenarios to ensure that any potential concerns or resentments are fully understood and mitigated. The Housing Advisory Board is planning a survey to collect information on the community's perspectives on ADUs while providing context on how the ordinance impacts Manitou neighborhoods. We invite the Planning Commission to partner with the Housing Advisory Board on this survey or other outreach activities. The Housing Advisory Board appreciates the opportunity to provide these comments and welcomes questions and conversations. Sincerely, Aaliyah German, Vice Chair on behalf of the Manitou Springs Housing Advisory Board.
Okay, thank you. So that is the comment. We'll move on to findings and review criteria. There are in Title 18, there are findings and review criteria for looking at code revisions. And so I listed those here. I believe there's 5 of them. One, the amendment. These are things that we need to find. Number one, the amendment is not likely to result in significant adverse impacts upon the natural environment, including air, water, noise, stormwater management, wildlife, and vegetation, or such impacts will be substantially mitigated. Staff suggests that the amendment does not appear to result in significant impacts because all existing codes and development standards would actually would apply to ADUs. Number 2, the amendment is necessary for or supportive of the protection of health, safety, welfare of the community. Again, the amendment appears to support the protection of these things because, again, any ADU development must conform with the city's existing codes and development standards. Number 3, the amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the intent stated in this land use and development code. And what I identified was there's some goals that I pulled from Manitou 2.0 that appears that this code amendment furthers primarily goal HN number 1, HN 2, and HN 3, talking about encouraging a diverse range of housing types, living situations to support safe, affordable, and accessible housing options that meet the needs of residents of all ages, abilities, and income levels. Number 2, to promote reinvestment in and rehabilitation of the city's housing stock to promote safe, energy efficient, and resilient homes. And 3, collaborate with local, regional, state, and federal partners to meet the city's affordable housing needs. Number 4, the amendment is consistent with any prior approvals, official plans, or policies that apply. And I indicated that this amendment is intended to comply with state legislation and also to remain consistent with the city's existing municipal code and conformance of the existing municipal code. Then number 5, the amendment would not significantly increase nonconformities. And this amendment does not create or support non-conforming uses or development. So we have some motion language options. You can move to recommend to City Council to approve the draft ordinance as written. Number 2, recommend to City Council to approve the draft ordinance with any amendments as specified. Or 3, recommend City Council to deny the draft ordinance.
Is that it?
Questions? Yes.
Okay, questions? Kiri?
Sorry, I missed last month's meeting. I was having fun in Alaska. I really appreciated the HAB letter. I thought it was a good summary with some concern, I think valid concerns. I wonder if we can't revisit the fact on ADUs being used as a short-term rental. I really just feel like that shouldn't be in the language.
I think there's lots of room for discussion based on this letter, but I think we should go on with the public hearing first.
Okay, sorry.
And then deliberate and discuss. But other questions for staff, any clarification or misunderstandings or things you want to know more about?
Yeah, just on the size of the ADUs, I think we discussed not having a limit at the last meeting or whatever that lower limit.
Yeah, try to get a little closer to your mic
Oh, I'm sorry.
because we want to get it on so people in the
Gotcha.
audience can hear.
So the question was, I thought we discussed not having a minimum or limit, or I think the current code says it has to be at least 100 square feet or something like, and I thought we talked about putting that minimum in there as at 100 square feet.
Yes, we did. I was furiously taking down notes. That was discussed, and then somebody did throw out something like 200 or 250 square feet as a minimum too, as well. So I heard a number of different things at the meeting, but yes, you're correct that was thrown out to just have no minimum at all and just make the development of the ADU subject to the applicable building code and housing habitability code.
Anything else? I'm curious a little bit about, when we have, essentially what we're doing with having no limits, we're basically cutting the, cutting the minimum lot size in half. We're, instead of 8,600, it's 4,340 or whatever. And, I started to think like, if we just said we had smaller zone districts, at least we'd have the setback. What I see is like a real scary possibility would be someone deciding, well, I've got a 2,500 square foot house. I've got real estate here. If I cram it in where I put this other structure within 10 feet or even less of my existing structure, I can shove in another 2,500 square feet. This seems really ugly for the neighborhoods, for the community. And I think it's really strange, but I was just wondering how you would address that. Is we just rely on the standards of the regional building where if you have fire protected walls, you can actually go down to 5 feet separation between structures?
Essentially, I think essentially, yes. The short answer is yes. If the planning commission wants to recommend, for example, a maximum square footage of what the single family dwelling unit is, as an example. So if it's 2,500 feet, then you could build up to 2,500 feet for an ADU. What you're doing is you're allowing, or you're letting the other dimensional standards govern how big it can be. So that includes setbacks, height restriction, and available land or available space on the lot to build.
Yeah, but I guess I just want clarification. There would be nothing in our code or in regional building that would prevent me from staging a second large dwelling within 5 feet of my existing dwelling, assuming I met the side setbacks and the front setback and the rear setback.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, just wanted that clarification. Any other questions? Okay, let's open this up to the public. If anybody in the public would like to comment on this, now would be the time.
Good evening, Nate Nassif, member of the Housing Advisory Board, 324 Plainview Place. Thank you, Carrie, for giving a shout out. I'm here as sort of the collective voice for the Housing Advisory Board. And the only thing that I think we wanted to say, and it's in the last part of the letter, is how much we appreciate you allowing us and being open to us to share these considerations with you. And I wanted to give a particular shout out to Fred and his team, who's been exceptionally helpful. The one postscript to think about in the last paragraph is Fred's team has done a wonderful job sizing the potential of what new units could be built. I think it was around 350 or 400. And so what we were proposing in our last meeting a couple of nights ago was we'd like to get maybe more precision around that with doing a survey where we would go out to all the applicable single family residences and simply try and get their input. So we can get a better sense for what the future impact may be. So thank you.
Thanks. Any questions for Nate?
I have a question. After listening to Fred's presentation on parking, do you feel that that's clarified the parking for ADUs or not?
I'd actually defer to Fred on that. Sorry to pass the mic to you, but I think he's best positioned to expand on it.
He gave the presentation on parking. So on the parking restrictions for ADUs. I just wasn't sure if that answered the HAB's questions or not.
Think so, but I don't, to be honest with you, I'm still trying to wrap my head around. So I don't want to speak on behalf of HAB on that issue.
Okay, if we could add something that would make it more clear, we could. This is an opportunity, but if we're unclear.
Yeah, on that one, I need to understand it myself a little bit more, to be honest. with
Okay,
you,
we'll
so I
let
don't
it
wanna speak
stand
on
as he
that.
presented. Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah, sure.
I have a question too. One of the things in this memo is accessory, you recommend a size of no greater than 750 square feet or 50% of the principal unit in the habitable space. And no more than the greater of those. Was that unanimous within the housing board, that thinking?
Yes,
And
there's no counter perspective on it.
okay, so the thinking is this is the whole point of this measure at the state level and what we've been advocating in the HAB for the last 8 years is to have affordability, to have a cheaper price point. So that's why you stick with the hope for smaller rather than bigger.
Yes, and I also think it ties into what you had just mentioned a few minutes ago about the concern with the way the current language is written, where if you have a 25 square foot house with habitable space, you could build an equal single attached unit, and that could potentially impact the integrity of the neighborhood. So that was also part of the motivation behind that. So whether it's 50% or 40% or 35%, whatever that scaling factor may be, we wanted to raise it for you to help support and inform wherever you land on that. Some people may feel, to your point, or at least my sense from the way you were describing the scenario with another 2,500 square foot house going up right next, this scaling factor of 50% at least brings it down to preserve the integrity of the neighborhood a little bit, or at least that's what we're suggesting for you to think about.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
If this draft ordinance is silent as to the prohibition on short-term rentals, meaning that if an applicant in the future has an ADU and they comply with the LUDC as it pertains to short-term rentals, could you help me understand the risk in a draft ordinance not addressing short-term rental prohibitions?
There was discussion among the group that tied back to, I think, one of the first work sessions where there was discussion around this idea that the portfolio of new builds, of new ADUs, would somehow comply with the existing short-term rental licensing, meaning that the available housing stock, and I don't know what that percentage is. So my sense is that there may be an opportunity, provided that it's managed very carefully. But I think collectively across HAB, we all feel very strongly that the spirit and the intent of this law is not to build short-term rentals. But I just want to postscript it with, I really like the ideas in that work session from a couple of months ago, where there was the possibility that it could be managed somehow within whatever percentage is allocated to short-term rentals. So just a thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, great. Thank you. You've got more attention than any of our applicants.
Thank you.
Okay, would anybody else in the audience like to discuss this? Okay, I don't see anybody, no hands raised online, so we'll close the public hearing, the public comment portion of the hearing. So I guess we can discuss a little bit. I'll just start by saying I think it's totally self-defeating if we have an ADU ordinance that has no size limits. We're defeating the purpose of what the intention of the state legislature was, and defeating the purpose of what the intention of our HAB has been since at least I was on the HAB back in 2018. And this was one of our primary things to look at for adding the opportunity or the possibility for people like teachers or firefighters or police, junior policemen to actually live in the community. And I think without having any kind of cap on it, we're just giving an opportunity for people to make a lot of money and not really help us. Like in, I just went out and imagined, like I would never do it. But unfortunately, I'm not going to live forever. Someday someone else is going to own my parcel. And I could easily throw up a 2,500 square foot ADU in my front yard. And I think it'd just be tragic if that happened a lot. I walk a lot in Manitou, and there's still a lot of properties, even in the general residential. You walk along at El Paso Boulevard, you can see it. There, we could just basically double have a lot more big single family dwellings, and they'd be really cool. And I don't think there'd be any trouble selling them. But I think the result would be we just have a lot more expensive housing that certainly would not be attainable by, someone 30% of AMI or even 50% of AMI wouldn't even be able to consider it. So that's just my thought out the chute, and I'll open it for conversation.
Well, what are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that we have some kind of a size limit. And, I'm comfortable with what the state mandated min and max are. I'm comfortable with going slightly smaller on the min. I tried to imagine 100 square foot ADU, and it'd be bizarre. It would just, I can't imagine, I thought, well, maybe I looked around in the assessor's website to see what some of the ones are in Manitou, and there are some that around 400, 425, even 350. At least you could have a bathroom, because part of the code is it has to be an enclosed space for the bathroom. So some kind of, I would be comfortable having some kind of minimum, but on the high side, it seems to me anything more than 1,000, and we're getting out of the attainability factor. 1,000 square feet, you could easily have a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath dwelling. There are a lot of those up in Denver. I see them in neighborhood I spend a lot of time in, and they're very pleasant. But that way, at least there's no question that square footage translates to selling price or rental prices. The bigger the space, the more you're going to be able to get for the thing, and people will go for the market. They're not going to, most people aren't going to be charitable about it and say, oh, I want to have a policeman live in our community. And so I just, there's no way I'm going to vote for something without any kind of a cap. I just can't do it. I'll respect the decision of the commission, but I'm not on board at all with that.
I could support the HAB suggested language. Could you live with that? The shall be no more greater than 750 square feet or 50% of the principal unit and habitable space?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I think their language was perfectly acceptable to me.
Do you remember what the state recommendation was for the min and the max?
Fred has it for sure.
The state requires that communities allow between 250, is it
Five.
200? No, the minimum.
5.
No, that's the maximum. They allow between 250 square feet and 500 square feet. Oh, sorry. That's 750 square feet. We're compelled to allow at least between 500 and 750 square feet. We can allow less than that and we can allow more than that, but we have to allow that for an ADU between 500 and 750.
Chelsea,
Oh, Commissioner Day also has her hand raised.
thank you.
I support the HAB proposal. I agree. We should have a cap.
Okay.
As far as, I agree with having a cap, that makes sense. As far as the lower end, you talk about and that's why I'm going to, from an affordability standpoint. If we're talking about ADUs, we're also talking about a garage conversion or a attic conversion or a basement conversion to allow an ADU. So it is possible to get to a lower square footage than 250 square feet. And if you're wanting to add housing availability, that in my mind, that's a more likely outcome because of the cost involved.
Yeah, isn't a typical 2-car garage is like 20, is it?
A 2-car garage would typically be about 400 square feet.
Yeah, that's sort of so, somewhere between 300 and 400, I'm comfortable with. It seems tight, but I lived once in a garage that was a single car garage, but I shared a bathroom.
So perhaps a limit of 250 at the low end, if that's what it sounds like. A figure 20 by 20 space, you could probably fit a small kitchen and a bathroom and a living space in there.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. What's the other thinking? Minimum of 250 and max 750 or
50% of the principal unit?
See, I think they say no more than the greater of 750 or 50% of the principal unit. And I like that language. I think that's works for me.
And then just add the minimum
Yeah, and
of
just
250 at the beginning.
I
yeah.
think Fred's working on our language real time.
Oh yeah, I'm just writing it down. Hold on. Okay, so the way it's written right now, we say accessory dwelling units shall be no less than 250 square feet in habitable space and no more than the total space found in the existing single-family detached unit. What we would do is if I'm hearing everybody right, we would change that to say no less than 250 square feet and no more than 750 square feet. Or
I think then the greater of.
oh, sorry.
seven-
Okay, there it is. There it is. Shall be no more than the greater of 750 square feet or 50% of the principal unit in habitable space. I think we have to say whichever is less.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, or the greater. I apologize.
So if we had a 2,000 square foot principal dwelling unit, they could, in theory, build between 250 square feet and 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, and I think that would be perfectly reasonable. Like, if you think about, thousand square feet, you could have a pretty, it could be a permanent dwelling for someone, not just like, you know,
A garage band.
till they meet someone and.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that I think the greater is the main change that I'm hearing. So, I think I have a good grasp on it.
Yeah, so let me just make sure that we're all on the same page. So when we say, so if the main dwelling unit is 2,000 square feet, so 50% of that is 1,000. That means somebody could build up to 1,000 square feet of ADU space.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I think this would be the factor that would probably minimize the exploitation of the law and, people coming in and putting in another big, beautiful building and we'd actually get something that would be attainable and affordable even sometimes, and it'd be great. So.
Then why don't we just say that as opposed to the greater of 750 square feet, just say that the maximum is 50% of the principal unit.
I believe that the intent there is for if you have a principal dwelling unit that is 1,000 square feet, 50% of that would actually be less than than what we're required to allow by law. So we have to allow up to 750 square feet.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, yeah, okay, I like that language if everybody is comfortable with that, I would move that we recommend that language, recommend that. I don't have the motion language here, but so I guess we can do this all in one motion, right? Or do we want to break it down?
Yeah, we can, right now, all three changes are in one ordinance, one draft ordinance. So
Okay.
you can, so it's written up in such a way where you can make one motion to approve all of it. Or if you wish, you can break it up if you have different opinions about each one.
I'm okay with all at once. What do you, Gary? Okay. Do you want to do it, Gary? Okay.
Just a clarification, we haven't talked about short-term rentals. Are we leaving the short-term rental issue out of the, just leave it untold or?
Oh, no, we need to discuss that. Okay, I'm sorry. I was jumping ahead. So Carrie, it looks like you want to talk.
That would be my suggestion, to leave it out completely. I know the letter says that this ordinance could change in the future about short-term rentals. A lot can change in the future. And so we have to really go by what we currently are dealing with or what we're currently under. And so I would say leave the short-term rental piece out of the change and say if it complies in current with the current requirements, then someone can do that. And you can't speculate what might happen in the future, in my mind.
Carrie.
Well, I would agree with that. And that for that specific reason, I would like to make it codified that that you can't have as a short-term rental, just because the intent of the law and the reason we're here is to try to create more affordable housing. So to say somebody could, build one and use it as a short-term rental really is counter to that. and counter the reason we're adding ADUs to the community. So I'm totally against having them be available and used as short-term rentals.
I think we've talked about how the possibility of that is pretty rare, considering we were at what, 1.5 of our 2%. So there's just not going to be that many more allowed in town. Secondly, we already have ADUs that are being used as short-term rentals. And if you're going to have to try and grandfather those in, then you're placing administrative burdens on the city. And I don't see any need for that.
Yeah, I think right now we already have the situation where we have a cascading grandfathering in of vacation rentals that goes back to like 2000. You know, we have some that predated our ordinance, then we have some that were when we had our initial ordinance in 2016, and then we changed it later on. So, you know, we've sort of followed it through the process. And so I don't see that as being a big issue. I think, you know, I think it's minimal how many short-term rentals are available, and it's not really the percentage, it's just the 500-foot radius is making it. I mean, there's what, 3 or 4 places left to even do it. And so I'm kind of neutral on this one. I'd rather restrict it, but I can live with it either way. And Megan has her hand up. Megan?
I'm also neutral, but if we do add a restriction, the key point or word in the Housing Advisory Board's letter is new. Like, I don't want my existing property, and I don't want the administrative burden of having to figure out, well, who already had an ADU. We could tie it to a building permit. Like, you cannot have a permit for a short-term rental for a property that was built within the last 5 years or something. If the building permit is within the last 5 years, something like that would be a way to try to avoid some of that administrative burden and really focus on new. Just a thought.
No thoughts? Justin, you've been quiet. I'm gonna make you talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a little more neutral than I was last month, but I still think the risk is low here. I think our code is adequate. And I just don't think we need to include short-term rental provisions in an ordinance that's designed to be talking about ADUs and housing affordability. I think that's a separate issue. So I'd be in favor of leaving it out because I don't think that it's going to actually have any functional purpose with this ordinance.
I agree. Well said.
Okay, I think you certainly have a majority wanting to leave it out, so let's leave it out. We can always rely on council to mess up whatever we do modify whatever we do anyway, so. So we have this draft ordinance, and do we have the language crafted for this modification on the min and max? So I would move that we recommend to city council that they approve the draft ordinance as revised tonight in our meeting, including language that limits ADUs to no less than 250 square feet and no more than the max of 50%. But okay, you can state the language.
So it'd be no less than 250 square feet and no more than the greater of 750 square feet or 50% of the principal unit in habitable space.
Perfect. I make that motion. Is there,
Second that.
is there any more discussion?
With the deletion of the short-term rentals comment on the draft. It is. Yes.
Oh,
It's inadvertently in the draft ordinance, and that's my bad, but yes, I would say yes, I would say as amended to remove that from the draft because I inadvertently put it in the draft.
okay. I missed that when I scanned this. So yes, we're leaving that out. So we have a motion and a second. It doesn't have the ADU language in it, but it does have the limit. Yeah. STR. Okay. Okay. Any questions, comments, discussion? Then let's vote. All those in favor? Okay, so that recommendation will go on to council. And so let's move on. Any notice of council action and updates?
Just a quick question, because I know we talked about short-term rentals earlier, about parking requirements. Is that something that we should look at as far as requiring a certain number of parking requirements when you have that situation just like we had tonight? Because I think there's a question, is 2 spots isn't enough for a short-term rental and a home like that when you're getting more spaces onto the street. So that's just a question. That's something that should be addressed in the code in the future.
I think maybe clarification. I felt like they were following the code, but maybe we just need to review that at some point.
Yeah, the legislation is pretty restrictive. Basically, what it says is,
I think he's talking about existing what our language is for short-term rentals. And
to clarify that,
yeah, just
The question we had about 2 parking spaces versus 3, and how many should there be when you have a situation like we saw tonight, even though the code seems nebulous, I'll say.
Because we now have owner occupied. It was the overlapping owner occupied plus the short-term rental.
yeah, okay, yep, I understand. Okay, so we can probably we can clarify that if there's we can require a space be dedicated to an ADU if it already exists on site.
So, in regards to the short-term rental permit that was issued tonight, what we've done in the past 2 or 3 years is that we have stacked that requirement to require parking for the single-family residential plus parking for the short-term rental. And so Zach and I spoke about that when he was writing his staff report. He pointed out correctly that the code actually doesn't require us to do that. So now with this legislation and not requiring off-street parking for new single-family residential, I think that's where it gets a little unclear, is if we have new construction that has a single-family residential that does not require off-street parking, plus a short-term rental that does require off-street parking. I think we will have to wait for the stars to align perfectly to see what's appropriate in that situation. I think we could absolutely make a separate code amendment, but I don't think it belongs in this ordinance, which I think is where the confusion was. So.
No, I think he's talking about us doing some modification to the short-term rental and how we handle parking. Now, it doesn't have anything to do with the ADUs. He was, I think, specifically speaking to the layering of you've got somebody in the house, plus and so in theory, if they have 2 bedrooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms downstairs, and they're only providing 1 parking space, I think that.
Sure.
Right, yeah, you'd hate to see short-term, having too many vehicles when parking's already a challenge in many areas. And so that's That's exactly, nothing to do with what we just approved. It has to do with clarification on maybe requiring more spaces for a short-term rental.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. Yes, we can clarify that in a future code amendment exercise.
Just real quick, Zach used the term non-cumulative as far as the parking equation. Does anybody remember when we wrote that ordinance? Did we did that fall through the cracks, or did we talk about this issue, or did we change it? What's the history?
I always thought that we had the expectation that you had to, if you had someone living there, there had to be at least one parking place for them, plus however many vehicles you were going to allow
Exactly.
for the rental. So if that broke, that was an oversight, and we should probably
Yes.
clean that up, because that was a big deal. We actually denied a few
Right.
because they couldn't provide the off-street parking.
Right. So this is something we should address quickly.
For the 5 left.
Yeah.
Okay, so any council updates or other information?
No real updates except that we're in the middle of budget season, so we're planning department is preparing our budget to present to city council in October. And for what it's worth, we've been asked just to keep our budgets flat.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Then let's adjourn.